Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and Gamefound over the next week. If you're new here, we do this every single week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you do want to stay up to date, this is the place to be. But before we get started, I do like to go over some news and announcements that I just found out about. Except I'll be honest, I didn't have a whole lot of time this week, so I haven't heard of anything new, so we can just skip over that this week. But other than that, I do like to give a quick mention to Alex over at Boardgame Co. because him and I do work together keeping track of all these upcoming campaigns. I do this every single week, but he posts a video at the start of each month, going over the entire month and letting you know of those heavy hitters for that month. We are getting near the end of February here, so he should be putting up a video really soon, so if you do want to check that out, you can find a link to his channel in the description down below. But if you want to hear about even more games launching each week, definitely go ahead and check out Grant Lion or QVO Games because they're going to be putting up videos each week going over all the retail games that are coming out. And then if you're interested in historical war games, feel free to check out Zilla Blitz because he specializes in that genre of game, and there's a whole bunch of other crowdfunding platforms that do offer these. I'll have all these channels linked in the description down below if you do want to check them out, and if you do like their content, feel free to subscribe, and if you do like this content, I do appreciate it as well. But that is everything I have for an intro, and we do got a few games launching this week, so let's check them out. And the first campaign we have launches on February 25th, and this one is called Falling, and this one's a competitive resource conversion game where players are trying to get the most victory points at the end of the game. But we are starting off with a bang here because this one is my own personal pick of the week, and the reason for that is that this doesn't look like a super complicated game, and it doesn't look like it's trying to do too much, but what it does do, I think it's going to do really well. It also has a few really cool ideas that I haven't really seen in any other games, and I'll just go over a couple of those just to kind of give you an idea of what this game's offering. And what we're looking at here is the game set up for 4 players, with each player having their own personal player boards where they're going to have a bunch of different buildings on them, and then there's going to be a main board in the middle where players can deploy those buildings to different locations in order to gain the benefits there. But there's also a point tracker in the top left corner here and a turn tracker in the top right. And in most games, the point tracking and the player order are normally the least exciting aspects of a game, but in this one it actually makes those things really fun. This is the point tracker here, and as you're earning points, you're going to be moving around and making loops around this board. But what's really cool about it is that every time you get 10 victory points, you're going to be jumping back to the start of the board, but you also get to draw one of these cards, which is worth 10 victory points at the end of the game, so you will be maintaining that. But it also grants you some sort of random reward. So you'll be able to look at that and gain that benefit, and of course you still do get those points. I really like this because not only does it make getting victory points a little bit more exciting, but I think it's also going to introduce a little bit of a decision point where if you are close to that 10 victory point threshold, you might want to invest in just getting a couple victory points really quick for that instant bonus, rather than maybe investing in something else in the game. But then we have the turn order tracker, and this is a really interesting aspect of the game because this is a game where players can take pretty much as many turns as they are able to, which means that some players might be able to take more turns than others, or some players might want to pass early in order to save some of their resources for a following round. But this game introduces some more incentive to want to pass early because not only is it going to be moving you up in the player count for the following round, but as soon as you pass, you're going to be moving your colored player token into the leftmost unoccupied column. This means that you're going to be getting the reward in that location, but the rewards don't stop there because if the other players continue to play out more rounds and you're missing more and more turns because you've already passed, each time it comes back to you, you'll be able to move that token one space lower, getting an additional reward. I'm not saying this doesn't exist anywhere, but I have never seen this mechanism in any other game, and I really do like this, and I wish I saw it in more games. But we haven't even got into the gameplay yet, so let's go ahead and check out the way that a round plays, and this is a game that plays over a series of rounds, and at the start of each round, players are going to be gaining 2 different cards. There's a resource card, and then there is a skill card. Both of these cards are divided into 2 halves, allowing you to choose which side of the card that you want to take, with the resources just being granted to you instantly, but then the skill card is going to be placed into the bottom of your board so that you can only see the side that you chose. This is going to give you a new ability that you can use for the rest of the game, but you can see this little outlined section in the bottom right here, and that indicates that you do need to place a skill token on it in order to activate it. And like I said, you can take as many actions that you want on your turn, and some of your actions are going to be activated through using those limited skill tokens, and you can gain more of those as the game goes on. But then there's other actions that might just require you to spend a certain amount of resources. For example, if you want to place one of your buildings out onto the main board. One thing to note here is that each player does also have a companion that can grant you with different resources or actions that you can take advantage of each and every round. The other cool thing about your player board and getting those buildings out onto the main board is that anytime that you do that, you're going to be uncovering the location where you took that building from, and you always do have to start from the bottom moving up. Every time you do that, you're going to be unlocking the different resources that were associated with that building on your board, meaning that you're going to gain those resources at the start of each of the following rounds so you're able to keep that building off your board. And getting and keeping these buildings off your board is the main spotlight of the game, and when you do take a building off your board, you're going to be putting it on these rightmost boards that are all stacked up on top of each other, and you'll be able to put it on any location that you want and then gain that resource. But the only catch here is that you can't place a building higher than where your token is on the left track. Of course, you can use another turn to pay resources in order to push your token up even higher. And of course, that is beneficial because it could give you access to other boards that you're not going to be competing with other players for. But there is another benefit to doing this, because at the end of each round, the bottom two boards are going to be falling off and being removed from the game. And all those tokens that players have put out on them are going to be going back to your own personal player boards. This means that the spaces that you previously uncovered are then going to become covered again, and then you're not going to be getting those bonuses. But since only two boards are returned each round, that means if you push up your token high enough, you could actually keep buildings out for 2 rounds, or if you get all the way to the top, you could actually keep your buildings out for 3 or 4 rounds. That, of course, is why this game is called Fallen, and I really do like what I'm seeing with this one. It looks like a really solid design without a whole bunch of fluff, and I'll definitely be checking out once the campaign launches. So if you think this one looks interesting too, you can go ahead and find it in the description down below, and of course click that notify me button. Also launching on the 25th, we have Blasphemous, the board game, and this one is based on the video game with the same name, and players are going to be trying to seek redemption by completing a deadly pilgrimage. And although there will be different monsters that multiple players might take part in defeating, this is a competitive game and there will only be one winner. This game offers a whole bunch of pilgrimages that players will be able to play through, and you're only going to be choosing one per game, and it's going to come with its own set of cards and unique rules, making each game feel different than the last. Each of these do also have their own narrative aspect to them, with a bit of flavor text as well as narrative events that can be triggered throughout the game, and you're going to be finding those in the associated adventure book. But this is a game that has a ton of upgrades, and each player is going to be starting as their own unique character with their own set of stats and special abilities, as well as the accompanying miniature. But something that I really like here is that for each of these characters, there's actually going to be multiple different variant cards, giving you different options when you do play that character. This means that for a single miniature, you can actually have multiple different play styles. Of course, to track your character, their health, and their stats, and their upgrades, you're going to be using this player board here, and you'll be able to slot in more upgrades as you are able to acquire them. But that's not where the upgrades stop, because there is another really cool aspect of the game where you can actually upgrade your dice. This game offers dice where you can actually pop out the different faces, and as you acquire new faces throughout the game, you can swap those out with any of the existing faces on your dice, customizing them and upgrading them however you want depending on your strategy. But players will be taking turns taking their actions, visiting different locations and gaining access to the benefits of that location, and also resolving any events from the booklet. Players will be trying to complete both personal and public quests in order for different benefits, which usually do involve some sort of skill check. But of course, players will also be fighting different monsters in order to do things like gain upgrades or new cards or even upgrades to their stats. Each of the monsters do operate a little bit differently in this game, but there are also the big bosses that you can go up against, and when you fight against those, you will actually be fighting them on a separate board. They're going to have their own deck of cards that are resolving their turn, and of course, you're going to be using your dice and rolling those dice in order to make different hits, defend against them, or perform some other actions. The player that is able to complete their pilgrimage first is going to be the winner of the game, and if you do want to learn more about this one, go ahead and check it out, and I will have it linked down below. Also on the 25th, we have Suriya, the Last Horizon, and this one is a deck building strategy game where players are going to be using their cards to play actions in order to move their units around out on the board, take control of key locations, and generate valuable resources in order to try and win the game. And I'll just start off with some cool components here, because each player is going to have this giant board to hold all their different units, cards, but it also doubles as a shroud for you to keep some of your cards hidden. The different factions that players play as are asymmetric, but you're all going to be starting with the same 7 starting cards, but then each round you're going to be able to add more cards either from your faction deck or from a shared supply. The different locations are set up semi-randomly at the start of the game through a bit of a drafting mechanism, and like I said, each of these locations can offer you different benefits, but if you're also on a location that does have a higher stack, meaning that you have higher ground than the adjacent locations, that does give you a benefit during battle. But players are essentially going to be taking turns to spend resources in order to play the cards that they currently have in their hand. Each player is going to start with those 7 cards, and then each turn you're going to be using a card to perform its associated actions. These can allow you to deploy or move different types of units out on the board, upgrade units into more powerful ones, or even build bases which can allow you to summon units in that new location, but each of them do also grant you with a special ability. There's also different cards that could just grant you with special bonuses, and some cards you can actually keep in play in order to get those bonuses round after round. Most of the cards do require you to spend resources in order to play them, but you can also discard cards in order to trade them in for resources. This game also has something known as command tokens, and you'll be starting with just a few of these at the start of the game, but you can gain more as the game goes on, and you can assign those to your different squads that you have deployed out on the different locations in order to do things like extract additional resources from that location, move that entire squad into an adjacent location, or even attack an adjacent location. When players fight in this game, each of the different types of units have their own values for defense, and in order to defeat them you do need to inflict damage greater than that. Each of the different types of units also grant you with a certain amount of strength, which is going to be represented with the amount of dice that you get to roll, and you'll be rolling these dice that can grant you with different benefits like dealing out damage, adding defense to your side, or even allow you to play one of your cards as a tactic card, which can grant you with all sorts of additional benefits. And also, as the attacker, you do have an advantage with an extra die, and if you are on the higher ground, that will allow you to get extra rerolls. At the end of the round, players get all of their command tokens back, but they also get the opportunity to purchase new cards. But something that I really like about the end of the round is that you're also going to be getting resources based on the position and the units that you have out, but that also determines how many more cards you get to draw into your hand from your draw deck. The rounds continue like this, with players fighting against each other, trying to eliminate their opponents while gathering as much resources as possible, and the player that's able to do that best wins the game. And if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. Also launched on the 25th, we have Fight Deck, and this one is a 2-player head-to-head card battler where players are going to be fighting as fighters from video games. There's a whole bunch of different fighters that you can choose from, and they each come with their own set of super moves, wake-up moves, as well as their own deck of cards that you're actually going to be splitting into 2 different piles, one that you're going to be using for your actions, and then one that you're going to be using to track your health. What's really cool about this is that as you take damage, your cards from your health deck will go into your action deck, so you do gain access to them, but if your health deck depletes completely, then of course you have lost the game. After each player has chosen and set up their character, each player is then going to be drawing 3 cards into their hand, and then the game's going to be playing over a series of rounds. At the start of each round, there is a random draw from the top of each player's draw deck, and you're just going to be revealing those cards, and this is going to determine which player starts with the advantage. Whichever player doesn't have the advantage is going to start the round, but turns do go back and forth from that point, with each player trying to counter the other player's attack by playing a card from their hand that's higher or equal to the value of their opponent's previous card. This continues until a player can't play a card, and then it's the last card that's going to be activated, and each of these cards can have different icons on them that can cause damage or trigger different rounds, either a combo round or a wake-up round. And in the case of a combo round, the winning player can play as many cards as they can in descending order in order to create a combo of attacks, with each of those cards adding 1 damage to that attack, and you are allowed to draw from your draw deck, although there is a chance that you end up drawing a card that's higher than a previous one, and in that case it would end your combo. The wake-up rounds work a little bit differently because your character's wake-up cards are actually in a separate area out in front of you, and whenever the wake-up round is triggered, then you're going to be able to add all of those to your hand. Players will then choose one of those cards and simultaneously reveal it, and the winning card is going to be activating its effects for that player. Most of the cards that you play are going to get discarded into your super meter, which you can then spend at any point later in the game in order to activate your super moves. The super moves are always available to you in front of you, but you do need to be able to pay the cost in order to play them. The rounds just continue like like this with players fighting back and forth until one of the players is defeated. And then of course it's the other player that wins the game, and if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. Also launching on the 25th, we have Supervolcano, and this one is a pen and paper game where players are trying to harness the power of a volcano in order to connect and power different settlements. This game can be played competitively or cooperatively, but this is a game that plays over 7 rounds, where players are going to be trying to unlock workers in order to build more power plants, which they can then use to generate energy to send to the different settlements. But of course, building your power plant closer to the volcano does grant you with more energy that you can spend, but the bigger and better settlements are going to be positioned further away from the volcano. Luckily, those workers can also be used to build pipelines, which you can then use to connect the different civilizations and power plants to move that power around a little bit easier. But each round after you've spent those workers to build those power plants and pipelines, you're then going to be calculating your total output and then deciding how you want to split that power amongst the various settlements. Your ultimate goal here is to send power to the settlements with more civilians, because the civilians are the only way to gain victory points in this game, but you do also want to send power to the settlements with the workers, because the workers are what are going to be allowing you to build more power plants and build more pipelines in order to connect more settlements. If you grow settlements enough, you can also gain specialists that you can spend for special advantages. And at the end of each round, players are each going to check to make sure that they extracted enough power from the supervolcano to prevent a disaster. And if not, you're going to be increasing your danger level up on your sheet. And then you're going to be rolling the number of dice displayed on that disaster level, with each of the sides of the die corresponding to a certain amount of population loss. The game continues like this over the 7 rounds, and then it's the player with the most victory points at the end that wins the game. And if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. Also launching on the 25th, we have Biathlon Blast. And this one is a competitive game where players are trying to be the first to cross the finish line in a biathlon, and each player is going to be playing as a unique athlete with their own strengths and weaknesses, and each player is going to be starting with a hand of cards that they're going to be using to take their actions. Each round, players are going to be choosing one of these cards from their hand to play, and this is going to be first determining the turn order, but then secondly, each of these cards is going to offer 2 sets of actions to choose from, and players are going to be going in that turn order, and when it gets to your turn, you're going to choose one of those action sets to activate. The actions that you choose are going to determine how many movement points you get, and more movement points does normally correspond with raising your pulse. This is not a good thing, because part of the biathlon does include aiming and shooting at targets, and if you do have a higher pulse, that's going to be more difficult for you to have that precision. Shooting those targets is handled through dice rolling, of course, with higher requirements for those dice if your pulse is higher. Of course, there is also the weather to worry about, and each of the cards will grant you with some amount of management of the wind, which does also affect your aiming when you're firing the rifle, but it also can affect your skiing. But the game continues like this, with players choosing a card each round and then taking those associated actions, rolling the dice when they get to the portions for the firing range, and the first player to cross the finish line wins the game. And if you want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. Also launching on the 25th, we have the Champions of Midgard, the 10th Anniversary Edition. And if you're not already familiar with this game, this is a worker placement game where players are going to be trying to earn the most glory by defeating monsters. This new edition is going to be introducing brand new artwork across the board, as well as upgraded components, and it's also going to be rebalancing some of the promo and expansion content, and then of course offering everything that the game has to offer in a single big box solution. I am filming this one before the campaign's launched, so they haven't revealed too much of this content just yet, so if you do want to check it out, I will have it linked down below. But if you're not familiar with this game, like I said, it is a worker placement game, and players are going to be playing over 8 rounds, putting their workers on different locations in order to gain the various actions or benefits there. The different locations are mainly going to be used to grant you with additional dice that you can use in battle, gain you resources that are used in a variety of ways, or gain you access to fight a certain monster. There are also locations that can grant you tokens for rerolls to make your battles a little bit easier, or you can also buy additional workers, and when you do choose to fight a monster, you can either fight the monster close to the city or in a distant land. When you're fighting a monster near the city, you're going to be reserving that monster by putting your worker under it, but then all the battles resolve at the end of the round after all players' workers have been placed. But then each of those battles are going to be resolved one by one, with each monster having a different amount of health and a different amount of damage that they can inflict on you. At the start of the battle, you get to decide which dice you want to commit to that battle, and then you're going to be rolling those dice and then inflicting the amount of damage that you roll, with some of the dice also granting you with some other abilities like defending against their attacks. But each time that you aren't able to defeat the monster is going to inflict its damage amount on you. Then you're going to have to discard the amount of dice equal to the damage that you aren't able to block. The battle continues like this back and forth until you either run out of dice, and in that case you get nothing. But if you win the battle, then you're going to be gaining the glory from that card, as well as any additional bonuses. But if you chose to fight a monster in a distant land, you're going to be looking at the bottom of the board here. And whenever you choose to fight in this area, you're still going to be choosing which monster you want to fight. But each of these different monsters are going to have a different cost associated with them for you to add dice into that battle. The cost to add dice to each of these battles is indicated on the board above the monster card that you're choosing to fight, with the rightmost ones being a little bit cheaper, granting you with 2 dice for each food, and the left ones being a little bit more difficult, only granting you 1 die per food. The catch here is that since these monsters are in a distant land, you do have to sail to them, so you're going to have to choose or purchase a boat in order to do that, and each of these boats are going to have a limited amount of capacity, and you're only going to be able to fit as many dice and food as dictated by that capacity. So you're going to have to decide what ratio of dice versus food you want to do, and this will probably also play into which monster you want to fight. Not only that, but before you're able to fight the monster, you do have to flip one of these event cards, and these are just randomly drawn out, and these can cause all sorts of negative effects that might throw some of your dice or food overboard. From then on, you're going to enter that battle with the dice you have left over and the food that you have left over to pay for them, and then the battles just resolve the same as I mentioned earlier. The rounds continue like this, with players taking their actions and fighting monsters to earn glory, but one thing that I should note about some of these action locations is that if a player doesn't choose an action location, it's actually going to get additional resources or dice added to it, meaning that if you take it on the next round, you can actually get multiple dice at once from a single location. The player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game, and if you want to check this one out and see everything that this new version is going to be adding, you can find it in the link down below. Also launching on the 25th, we have a new expansion to the game Nanty Narking, and this one is called the Rise of the Cthulhu expansion. This one's actually going to allow players to play as those great old ones, performing all sorts of nefarious deeds, and also including giant miniatures that you'll be able to put out onto the board. Of course, players' actions as monstrous super beings from space can have all sorts of effects on space and time, which means that players don't want to push their actions too far, because that can actually push the shared doom track all the way to the end, which causes all the players to lose the game. There's not too much more info on what this version is going to be adding to the game, but it is going to be spicing it up a little bit, granting you with those different characters that you can play as, and also introducing some new mechanisms. If you're not familiar with the original game, this is a game that plays in Victorian London, and players are all going to be playing as different characters with their own unique win conditions. This is an important aspect of the game, and it's one of the reasons that you keep your character hidden. But players are going to start with some action cards and a bunch of different types of units that they can deploy out onto the different locations on the board, and each round players are going to be taking turns using those action cards to take those various actions. Cards can grant you with an assortment of different actions and special effects, and you can choose which you do and don't want to activate. These cards can allow you to place units or buildings out on the board, assassinate other player units, gain money, cause random events, or even use the card's special action, which can do all sorts of different things, but some of these cards can actually allow you to play an additional card on that same turn. If 2 players ever occupy the same space, you're going to be putting a conflict token there, which prevents any buildings from being built, which is one of the reasons that the assassination action is so important, so you can get that other player out of your space and build whatever building you want to build there. And players are just trying to do all of this to try and complete their specific win condition first, which might require them to have certain buildings out or occupy certain locations, but there can be all sorts of other requirements as well, and I think with this new expansion you're going to see quite a lot of changes to those requirements, because I doubt that the great old ones are too concerned with building buildings. But if that's interesting to you and you do want to learn more about it, you can find the campaign in the description down below, and of course click to get notified once it launches. Also launch on the 25th, we have Cannibal World, and this one is a head-to-head card combat game that can also be played 2v2, but it is the last faction standing that is going to be winning the game. This is a game where players are going to be choosing the faction that they want to play as at the start of the game, and each of these factions is going to have their unique deck of cards that you're going to get along with them. To start the game, players are each going to be drawing 6 cards from their respective decks, and each faction deck has 2 different types of cards that you can find in there. There are the creature cards that you'll be playing out onto the table to attack your opponent, but then there are the action cards that can grant you with a whole variety of instant effects. This is a game that does play over a series of turns, and most of these cards do require you to pay a certain amount of tokens in order to play them. At the start of your turn, you do get to draw another card into your hand, but then you're going to be spending those tokens to do things like draw more cards, untap stunned creatures, or play a new creature card onto the table. And whenever you do this, you actually have 2 rows that you can play those cards into. The row closer to you is your cover zone, which has a little bit more protection, but then there is the hunting zone, which is above that, which will allow you to attack your opponent's cards. And of course, when you attack your opponent, you can only attack their hunting zone. Unless they don't have any cards in that area, then you can go ahead and attack their cover zone, unless they don't have cards there, and in that case you can actually raid your opponent, and if you do this 3 times, then that is one of the ways that you can win the game. The other way is if your opponent runs out of creature cards completely. But on your turn, you can also use those tokens to move units that you already have deployed between the 2 different zones, and of course you can also use a token to attack the opponent. And I already explained how that works, but I should also mention that when it's not your turn, you can also use your tokens for some other actions, like dodging or triggering different reaction cards. But the game continues like this, back and forth with players using those tokens to take those various actions, and the last player standing wins the game. And if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. And launching on February 26th, we have Kaijus from Space, and this one looks like a really fun cooperative game because in this game, players actually get to play as the Kaijus, which are just giant monsters that are trying to destroy a human city. Of course, the humans aren't going to be standing idly by, and they're going to be counterattacking and causing damage to your Kaiju, which can actually be good or bad for the players because as the Kaiju take on more damage, they can actually get more powerful, but if they continue to take damage after that, they can go into an unstable state, and if all the players end up in this state simultaneously, then that is the way that the players will lose. The game plays over a series of rounds where each player gets to take an action with their Kaiju, activating any one of their abilities. And these abilities can have a variety of different effects to help you slow down or damage the humans, or even help or heal your fellow monsters. Something that's really neat about this game is that players can choose to attack either the city or the humans themselves, and each of those targets are each going to have a dial associated with them, and every time you deal damage to the city, you're going to be rotating its dial, and every time you deal damage to the humans, you're going to be rotating their dial. This is a really important aspect to the game for a few reasons, because each time either of these dials is rotated, players are going to be earning a destruction token, and in order to win the game, you need twice as many tokens as there are players in the game. The other thing to note about these dials is that they also dictate the actions that the humans are going to take during their turn on the round, so you might want to manipulate these boards into certain positions by inflicting damage on them or not inflicting damage on a certain dial in order to get the best outcome for your team. Each round a plot card is going to get drawn that can have a whole variety of different effects on the game that could change your strategy in a variety of ways, and each of these could help the players or harm the players depending on what gets drawn. Something else that I really like about this game is just how it continually ramps up as the game goes on. Like I said, the players do get more powerful the more damage that they take, but the same thing does happen to the humans as well, because every time that you gain one of those destruction tokens, that's going to be upgrading those humans, making their attacks more powerful in the following rounds. But also, every time you gain one of those tokens, you're going to be flipping it to its other side, revealing a powerful human-controlled mech that they're going to be using to try and take you down. This mech is going to be entering the battle immediately with its own special ability, causing different negative effects to the players. If the players are able to survive all that and get those those required destruction tokens that they need to win the game, then they win the game and the human city has been successfully destroyed. And if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. And that is everything for this week, but don't leave yet because we still got a few awesome giveaways to announce, and these are the easiest giveaways to enter ever. You don't have to like or subscribe or do anything like that, although I do appreciate it. For these ones, all you got to do is head over to the Discord in the description down below, visit the giveaways channel, and then just click the emoji underneath that giveaway and it'll get you automatically entered, which will be drawn at the end of the week. There's no catch to it. You're not going to get signed up to anything, and I have all the notifications turned off on the Discord, so you're not going to get spammed with notifications. This is just something that me and the community have put together over the past few years, and it's just a place for you to talk about some of these games that are launching and to get even more insights into what is coming up in the future. But the first giveaway we have is for a pledge for Terminus Frontier, and this one is a cooperative tactical adventure game where you're going to be going through the outer reaches of space, playing through different chapters that are going to have you fighting all sorts of monsters, creatures, and criminals from the outer reaches of the universe. This is a game that's very focused on the combat, and players are going to be thrown into situations where they're going to have to work together to try and overcome the odds of whatever they're going up against, while also trying to complete all sorts of specific objectives. Of course, there's all sorts of items and gear that you can find along the way to help you and your crew, and this game features a really cool ammo deck system which incorporates deck building into each of your weapons. This giveaway is for the Hunter Pledge, which is going to get you a copy of the game and all unlocked stretch goals, and like I said, all you got to do to enter this one is head to the Discord in the description down below and click the emoji underneath that giveaway. And I should mention that all these giveaways are offered worldwide except for this one. This one is offered in North America, UK, and the EU, which is a good chunk of my audience, but anyone can still go ahead and enter in this one. And if I do draw you for number 1, but you're not in those regions, I'll just swap your giveaways with the next person that gets drawn who is in that region, assuming that they do want to trade. Otherwise, I'll just have to do a redraw. But the next giveaway we have is for a game called Demonuki, and this one is a card shedding game, and I do want to thank the creator of this one because I wasn't able to cover their campaign during its launch, but they still wanted to do a giveaway, so I just want to give you a little bit of an idea of how this game plays because, like I said, this is a card shedding game, and at the start of the game, all the cards are going to be shuffled and dealt evenly amongst the players, and each of these cards are going to have all sorts of special abilities that you can gain access to if you do decide to play that card. And of course, playing a card is one way to get that card out of your hand, which gets you a little bit closer to winning the game, but also hopefully it grants you with an ability that can give you a little bit more of an edge. Another thing you can do on your turn is that if you have 2 cards of the same type, you can actually pair them together and discard them face up in the middle of the table. This will allow you to get multiple cards out of your hand at once, so creating those sets is something that you really want to do. You'll probably want to keep an eye on what cards have been played and what's been discarded, so you have a good idea of which cards are still left, so you can try and create those pairs, because at the end of the round, every player is going to be drawing a card randomly from the player next to them. The game continues like this until one player discards all of their cards, and then it's that player that wins the game. And to win yourself a copy, just like before, head to the Discord and just click that emoji. And the last giveaway we have is for the Dungeon Map Maker and Map Pack, and this is a game where you're going to be playing solo, trying to create a dungeon that you're then also going to be trying to fight your way through. The way the game plays is that you're going to be rolling 2 dice each round, and then you're going to be choosing one of the values to determine what type of room you're going to be building, and then you're going to be using the other die to determine how many entrances that room can have. Some of the rooms might require you to put monsters in them, while some might give you options between different types of loot. But after you've built your entire dungeon, you're going to be moving into the exploration phase. At this point, you're going to be starting at the entrance of the dungeon and moving through the various rooms, interacting with whatever might be in those rooms. If there's a monster, you're going to be rolling a die to determine what monster is in that room, and then you're going to be attacking it back and forth until either you are defeated or the monster. There's different ways that you can earn experience points, and every time you gain 5 of them, you will be able to earn an upgrade. And the game continues until you either defeat the final boss, lose all your health, or lose your torchlight completely. This one is also offered worldwide because it is a print and play, which means that you'll just be getting the digital files for this one. But to enter this giveaway and all the others that I just mentioned, it's all the same here. Just click the emoji underneath that giveaway on the Discord. Good luck in the giveaways, and now let's go ahead and draw the winners from last week's giveaways. And we had StarDriven Gateway as well as Granfondo, and finally Pizza Rolls, which was done on the Discord, and there might still be time to enter that. So if you're watching this video soon enough, you can go ahead and check out the Discord and enter into that giveaway as well. well. And I did have a birthday to go to, so I did have to stop filming, and it's about 12 hours later now, so this video is probably going to be going up quite a bit later than usual, so I apologize for that. But let's get these giveaways done so I can hopefully get this edited and up in somewhat of a reasonable time. So the first one we're going to be drawing for is StarDriven Gateway, and we're going to be using this fancy application here. I'm not going to add the extra entries into this one because this one was only offered in the USA, and I do have members from all over the world, and I don't have a way to filter that yet. So this one's only going to be drawing from the YouTube comments, so let's go ahead and draw a winner. And the winner is Legolas GB, and I did ask if you were a member on a ship, which role would you want to play? And he says that he would like to be the janitor, and he'd spend a long time cleaning the holodeck because apparently it is always a mess in there. I'm not going to ask any questions, but congratulations on the win. Just email me at adam@shelfclutter.com and we'll get the pledge all sorted out for you. And next we're going to draw for Granfondo, and we're going to be doing the exact same thing here, but I have included the extra giveaways from the Ko-fi subscribers. So let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the winner is Daniel Anderson, teacher. Congratulations on the win. Feel free to reach out to me at adam@shelfclutter.com and we'll get that pledge all sorted out for you. Congratulations to the winners, and that's everything I have for you this week. I hope you all had a fantastic week, and I hope you enjoyed the Four Nations final game. I know I did. As much as I do love Connor McDavid, I think Bennington probably should have got the player of the game because he is what kept the Canadians alive for that game long enough for Connor McDavid to get that goal. That was some incredible goaltending from some very challenging shots from the USA team. It was a really tight game though, and I think it did a lot for the NHL, and I think a lot more people are getting more interested in hockey. If you're looking for more of that, the playoffs are going to be here sooner than you expect. And my bets are either on the Edmonton Oilers or the Winnipeg Jets. I'm not sure how much saying that's going to affect my subscriber count, but as always, thanks so much for tuning in, and until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full. What?